Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I've got 10 o'clock, and so with no objections, I'd like to go ahead and kick us off, and I'll call us to order. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to please make sure your computers or your phones are muted unless you're addressing the board. I'd also like to ask that if you do address the board, please identify yourself, your name, your title, your institution, etc. I appreciate you all for being here today. First things first, I'd like to welcome our new board members to their very first meeting. We had a press release go out earlier identifying our new board members, Miss Grayson Bigger of Pocahontas and Dr. Kyle Miller of Helena and Dr. Jerry Cash of Harrison. And so welcome to the board. Thank you guys so much for your willingness to serve. Appreciate you being here today and look forward to working with you on this board and all that you will do in the future for higher education here. So welcome. Thank you guys. Next up, Bill Clary of Conway has been appointed to one of our institutional boards, and therefore he has resigned from this coordinating board, but we do wish Bill well. That communication went out earlier, but we wish Bill well on his institutional board. I'm sure he'll do a great job. And then my third order of business before we jump into everything is I thought I saw Chris Gilliam on here. Chris, are you on here today?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Probably can't see me.
On behalf of the Higher Education Coordinating Board and the Division of Higher Education, I would like to recognize former Coordinating Board member Chris Gilliam for his outstanding work while serving on the Coordinating Board. He gave unselfishly of his time and of his talents to promote the cause of higher learning in Arkansas. And at this time, we present you with this token of our appreciation, and we ask that you please accept our best wishes for continued success in your future endeavors. And Chris, I just can't thank you enough. I've enjoyed working with you. I've enjoyed getting to know you better through this board, and we thank you for your service. I'd love to give you the opportunity to address the board and our audience today.
Well, I appreciate it. I thank you for what you and the rest of the board have done. I've gained a lot of experience. It's been a great journey. Thank Dr. Markham and the higher education staff for the things they do. And I just thank you for this brief recognition. Thanks a lot.
Well, we can't thank you enough, and good luck in all your future endeavors. Don't be a stranger. I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll ask Nicole to take roll and determine if we have a quorum.
Yes, sir. Al Brodell.
Present.
Kevin Anderson.
Here.
Lori Griffin.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right, thank you.
Grayson Bigger.
Present.
Jim Carr.
Here.
Jerry Cash. He is on the call. I think he might be having some difficulties with his microphone. Chad Hooten. Andy McNeil. Kyle Miller. Greg Revels.
Here.
and Michael Stanton.
Here.
We do have a quorum. We have 8 of the 11 members present.
Thank you, Nicole. Will be the minutes of the January 29th regular meeting. They begin on page 1-1 of our agenda book. Are there any questions or any changes to these minutes? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 29th regular meeting?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I thank you for that. Information agenda item number 2. Dr. Markham will present her director's report. Dr. Markham.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As always, the full report of the activities of my office are found in your agenda book. But a couple of items that I felt necessary to highlight today. We do have a planned institutional change. Deborah Frazier has announced her retirement from UACC Batesville, effective May 31st. Debbie has served as chancellor since May of 2007. She has served her community and institution with such passion, but in conversations with Debbie, she is eager to spend time with her grandchildren and travel, and we wish her the best in her well-deserved retirement. So Debbie, I don't know if you're on the call, but congratulations on your retirement, and we hope that you won't be a stranger. UACCB has big shoes to fill. We're the chancellor there, and we just wish that institution and Debbie so much of the best in the future. My next item, I'm going to cede a bit of my time during the executive report to a special guest. I have invited Catherine Lawson Griffin to talk with us today. She is the Justice Reinvestment Coordinator for the Office of Governor Asa Hutchinson. And I've asked her to come and spend just a few minutes discussing with the board and with our institutional leaders the crisis intervention services that she helps coordinate. My hope from this conversation is that she is going to shine a little light on something that's very critical among our college students, particularly in light of the pandemic situation that we find ourselves in. And I hope that your institutions will take an opportunity to access these services for students in crisis, and we'll reach out to Catherine. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Griffin.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to do a little background. Act 423 of 2017 was a 3-part bill, and 2 parts are especially important to your interests. And one is that the state implemented crisis intervention training for law enforcement. And so any police department with 10 or more employees has to have 1 full-time crisis intervention trained officer. And I know many of your college and university police departments may not be that large, but they still can have access to some of this training. All new law enforcement that are trained at ALETA get about 16 hours of crisis intervention training. And the Criminal Justice Institute offers a free online 9-hour course for any officers, but the 40-hour courses are the golden ticket, and they offer one-on-one role playing where they teach officers how to recognize people with different mental illness conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolarism, suicidal people. In all kinds of conditions, autism, Asperger's, so that they know how to interact with people and sort of figure out what's wrong with them when they encounter them, these people in crisis. And we know that there are many occasions where this occurs on college campuses. I know Jamie Cook, the Secretary Cook, has mentioned to me several times that the instances of suicide are on the rise at universities. I have a freshman in college, and I'm very in tune to this because there's been a lot of suicides at where he is in college, even since January. So what these officers can do if called is intervene and get help for these students, and they're trained to de-escalate situations. And that's not just for people with mental illness, but if you had a situation with an active shooter or something like that, that's what this training is wonderful for. And then along with this part of the act, we implemented 4 crisis stabilization units that Dr. Markham just referenced. And they are in 4 different communities right now. We have one in Fort Smith, we have one in Fayetteville, we have one in Jonesboro, and one in Little Rock. And so I know that is not close to some of your institutions, but it is within an hour or so of many of your institutions. And these are open to anyone in the state, and they're 16-bed units that you can think of as sort of a mental health emergency room. So if you've got someone in mental crisis, they can be brought by law enforcement. They can be referred from an emergency department. They can be referred from a community mental health center. They can be referred from a friend or a walk-in. Or the reason I brought you into this is because I think it'd be a perfect place for your counseling centers to utilize for students that need a little more than just in-person counseling at school. This is a place they can go for 24 hours up to 5 days, and it's nobody's turned away. They would accept insurance reimbursements from the students, but if they don't have it, then that's fine. They would help them get signed up for Medicaid though. But what would happen if someone walked into the door of one of these, whether they walked in on their own 2 feet or whether law enforcement brought them, would be they are immediately stabilized. They are assessed. If medication is needed, medication is started, and immediately individual and group therapy starts. And if they need longer term care, it is the post departure work starts immediately. They'll find them inpatient or outpatient facilities, or if they need more acute care, they'll arrange that. But it's the perfect place for a student that's contemplating suicide or something like that to reach out to. It's quiet, private. They're not going to be turned away. Nobody's going to probably know they're there. And it's just I think could be a big tool in the toolbox of your counseling centers for that student that needs a little more care, a little more attention. It's also, and the reason I really look forward to the opportunity to talk to you is I don't think that students with mental health issues or their friends or their professors know about these services. And so that's how I would like to partner with you all to see how we can get the word out. And I know social media is a great tool, but if we can get the word out about these centers to all your campuses, I think we could make a difference. And it's not just for people that are suicidal, of course. If I know the 20s is when a lot of young people start developing schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and so that's something that they can go there for help too. So that's what I would really like to talk to you about. I'd like to answer your questions about these places. They would not cost your institutions any funding, and I know I've heard a lot about funding since this call began. It wouldn't cost your institutions any money to send someone to these places, but maybe a small amount might be utilized to get this word out. And I know you have marketing departments and PR departments that could help with that, but I just would like to open it up for discussion to see if anyone has any questions or interest in these partnerships.
This is Dr. Mark and Catherine. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave that question slide up for just a moment. But while we do that, if anybody's thinking of a question, I know most of the time on this call, I have my presidents and chancellors. We have our chief academic officers and our chief fiscal officers. Might not necessarily have people on the call that are with student affairs or in student mental health. But if those of you on the call could please relay some of this information, Catherine's contact information, to those units on your campus who might be able to make these connections, that would be fantastic. We really want this service to be something available for your staff and your counseling and student health centers to be cognizant of in case you encounter a student who might benefit. So just wanted to say that, and if there's any questions, please speak now.
I also want to say we can train your law enforcement, and that is one suggestion I have. If the ASU system or the University of Arkansas system wanted to host a crisis intervention training class for law enforcement, I think that is one of the biggest things you could do. And even colleges and universities in Southern Arkansas, if you don't have access to the crisis unit, it is so valuable to have your officers trained in the crisis training. So we have upcoming classes, or we could do arrange special classes just for your institution. And I think that part's even more important than access to the crisis units, because it's that first step of de-escalation.
Well, seeing no questions, we will move ahead. I've already had a couple of messages come to me, Catherine, directly to share your information. So we will definitely get that information out to our campuses. I think we have several who are already interested in making contact with you. So thank you.
All right, great. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So the next item that I would like to speak with the board about is we are presenting to you today, and you should have received a full copy in your email just before this meeting, the draft of our new strategic plan. So those of you on the board and on the call who have been engaged in higher ed in Arkansas for the last couple of years, you've probably been involved at some level in the development of our strategic plan. We began the process in the summer of 2019. We convened on the campus of UCA. Most of our board members at that time were there. We had a lot of our presidents and chancellors, people we had from the Two-Year College Association, a real cross-section of higher education that kicked off the strategic planning process. And to be honest, we were making excellent progress toward getting this out before the first of the year. But as the world was interrupted with the COVID pandemic, we all slowed down just a bit, and things had to be completed through Zoom instead of in person. So it took a bit of a different shape. But so we're just a bit behind, but I think in the scheme of things, we're doing okay. So we have presented to the board today the draft. If you've learned anything about me, I think you would say that I'm precise and concise, and that's the way this strategic plan has come together as well. Precise because we've developed very definite and measurable targets for the next 5 years, and concise because we have minced no words. We have refined this plan down to about 31 pages from initially over 80 that we had submitted. The development of Align 2026 was a very collaborative process. I invited 4 think tank groups to convene around our 4 strategic goals that were set in that initial 2019 summer summit. Those think tanks consisted of subject matter experts from all across the state. So I had, financial aid directors and staff members working on our affordability metric. I had people from K-12, higher ed, the state chamber, the two-year college group, various participants working on the think tanks for each strategic goal, so that we had a good representation and a lot of thought leaders in the room in developing those. So with that said, I'm going to briefly go over our strategic goals. I'm going to ask that our board members take a look at that full document that I sent to you, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. But the central element of the Align 2026 plan is our gap analysis. If you were present at that first kickoff meeting in 2019, we had Robert Magoo there from Department of Information Services, and he has been a complete rock star in this process. So we used, and when I say we, I mean Department of Information Services and my great group of staff in our research and analytics department at the agency, develop a very sophisticated methodology that I won't even attempt to try to explain, but I would happily volunteer those professionals to give you a deep dive into that at a later date. But we've constructed a uniquely targeted set of goals that match projected occupational demand to the needed increase in program output from our institutions. So not only do we know which academic programs should be created or expanded, but we also know which regions of the state need more credentialed individuals in each specific area. So we have taken a laser-like approach to setting these targets that, I've already had a couple of national groups with some interest in looking at the way we did our strategic plan, because it has such a strong workforce and industry tie. So targets have been set to improve also the equitable outcomes for multiple underrepresented groups. And I'm kind of skipping around. So that first slide that you see there is our credentials target. We have set a goal of increasing targeted credentials. So not just all credentials, and not across the board credentials, but in those areas where we project a shortage, by 81,360 people with credentials by 2026. So that is the way we calculated those numbers, where we looked at what we typically produce, we looked at what we need, and we calculated the difference. So that's where the 81,360 came from. That's how much we need to increase production in those targeted areas to meet the demand that our state will have over the next 5 years. So the next slide is affordability. We looked at affordability from a lot of different angles, and we settled on really two major priorities. One was a FAFSA completion campaign. The federal application for student aid is the gateway for students to receive Pell Grants, federal student loans, a whole host of federal benefits, but it's also required for students to apply for any Arkansas state supported scholarship. So completing that FAFSA not only gives students access to funds, but it also provides them with the knowledge of what's available for them. A lot of students don't think they can go to college because they think it's too expensive, but then once they complete the FAFSA, they understand that college is within reach, and that there are solutions and opportunities for those students. So Arkansas has not done a good job of getting our high school graduates to apply for the FAFSA. We were only at around 54% of all high school students completing that FAFSA. We've set a very ambitious goal of 80% of all students. We leave a lot of federal money on the table for the students who end up in higher ed, and we have a lot of students who don't pursue higher ed because they don't complete the FAFSA. So that's one of our main goals. The other goal is to develop a needs-based aid scholarship program for Arkansas. And a little cliff note there, a side note there, Unfortunately, the needs-based aid program that we had proposed this legislative session did not pass, so that failed in committee. So we will have to leave that strategic goal priority on our plan and come back in 2 years stronger with a better proposal, and hope to get that through. And that would help our lower income students access additional state funds to attend college. The equity goal in strategy 3, it's much more targeted than in our previous strategic plan, in that we've established some really solid baselines and definitions for what we mean by equity. We've also broadened the groups that we are including in that equity goal to include not only underrepresented minorities, adults, and low-income students, but also rural students, prison reentry, foster students, and first-generation students. So there are a couple of those areas where we're going to have to begin collecting this data to set a good solid baseline, but we're going to engage in a lot of work around attracting those underrepresented groups of students into higher education, and we're hoping to increase each of those participation rates by 5% annually. And then our final strategic goal is very closely related to strategic goal number 1, in that we used our supply and demand gap analysis to establish all of the targets. But not only do we establish targets for our state, we have broken our state down into workforce regions that are consistent with the way that we track workforce in other areas of state government. And we have gone as closely as we could to a granular level to identify which areas of the state need to produce more credentialed graduates in which areas. So this is going to be very valuable when we look at academic program proposals in the future. We'll be able to see, if a institution in South Arkansas is proposing to add a program, we can link that back to our strategic plan to verify whether or not that is a program that will be needed to help us reach our goals. If it's not on that list, then the institution would, have to do some work to justify that from a demand standpoint. Not that they couldn't do that, but if it's already on that list, we have done most of the work for that institution in justifying the need for that program. It'll also inform how we prioritize our regional workforce grant dollars, so we know where we need to put funds and put resources to meet the demand in those areas. So, if we give $100,000 grant next year, we would encourage the institutions submitting their proposals to choose a program that has already been identified as something that's going to be high demand that needs to be expanded or improved to invest those dollars at their institution. So those are our 4 goals for our strategic plan. I've provided it to our board for a first look. It's not been released to the institutions yet, but I will be doing that very soon. So our think tanks had seen their individual sections, but they had not seen the entire plan until today. So I welcome questions from the board and your feedback. This plan will still be considered draft until this body convenes at our July meeting to either approve or not approve the strategic plan. Also, the governor will have to give his blessing before that July meeting. But at this point, we're substantially complete. So please take some time to digest that. And I look forward to taking your questions on that, and also making any changes that you think are necessary.
Dr. Markham, do we have that in paper copies?
You do not have it in your paper copies. You have that in your email as of about 9:30 today.
I should say, do you have paper copies? I'm sorry.
I do not, but I will get one just for you, Dr. Carr.
I'd like to hand it out to a couple of people that have questioned me about this. That'd be real helpful.
Okay, absolutely. We'll get you some paper copies.
Thank you.
All right. And then the final item that I would like to address for my report is our legislative update. So legislative session is set to recess on Tuesday. They will reconvene in the fall for redistricting purposes. But for higher education purposes, Tuesday will be the final day of session for us. We've had some mixed success, both in passing positive bills and stopping some potentially harmful bills from passing. I am disappointed that our needs-based scholarship initiative was defeated in committee. But as I said, we will regroup and plan to pursue that option in the 2023 session. As we still have a few days left, I don't have a summative list of acts impacting higher education, but I will provide that to the board in the coming weeks once everything has been finalized. I normally do that, give you a list of everything that has some kind of higher education impact. So you can look for that as well. But if there are any questions from the board, if there are bills that you've been tracking or anything that you have a question or concern about the impact of a bill, I would be happy to take those at this time, or you can have those conversations offline. So if I have no questions, Mr. Chair, that is my report.
Thank you, Dr. Markham. I want to thank Catherine Lawson Griffin for her presentation. Wonderful information. I encourage all institutions to take advantage of those services that she spoke about and that they are offering. I want to thank Dr. Markham, her entire incredible team, and all the thought leaders who've worked so hard for a couple of years now to put together that strategic plan. I'm very excited about the implications that it could have on academic proposals pressing forward, especially as it applies to needs in your region. And we look forward to hearing more about the legislative session as it closes out. Thank you. Informational agenda item number 3, Ms. Hazelwood will present the annual report on student retention and graduation.
Good morning. Yes, thank you. I have 2 information items for you today. This first one is for the annual report of student retention and graduation. I always try to start these reports with some national numbers because if I don't, I always get asked for them anyway. So this first slide is just a little bit of data from the National Center for Education Statistics. The most recent data available on their website is from April of 2020. I was told that they plan an update for the next cohort to be published next month. So I was a little bit early to get some new data from them, but the data they do have is for the fall 2017 cohort of first-time full-time degree-seeking students. If you look down at the table, you can see that when you're looking at all institutions nationwide, for 4-year public institutions, 81% of the fall 2017 cohort returned for their fall of 18 term. And then if you look at 4-year private nonprofit, 81% of those also returned in the fall of 18. For our 2-year colleges nationwide, 62% of the fall 17 cohort returned to school in the fall of 18. Now for a look at Arkansas numbers. This is a look for our public institutions by sector. The first set of columns represent our 4-year universities. As you can see, we had a nice 2% increase for our 4-year universities when you look at the most recent cohort. So for the fall of 19, entering first-time full-time students, 77.1% of those returned in the fall of 20. Now for our 2-year colleges, they did experience a slight decline for their fall 2019 students that returned in the fall of 20. And when you can combine the two together, we ended up with a fall 2019 retention rate of 70.6%. Here's a look at fall to fall retention rates for Arkansas by gender. As you can see, for our 4-year institutions, both the male and female cohorts experienced an increase in their retention rate for the fall of 2019. Now, our 2-year colleges, the male students actually showed a slight increase but the female students did show a 2% decline. Here's the chart for race and ethnicity for the most recent cohorts. That's the fall of 18 cohort in gold and the fall 19 cohort in blue. As you can see, we had two race ethnicity groups that showed decent improvements. For the four-year institutions, our Hispanic cohort reported a 4.6% improvement in retention rates, and our Black student cohort improved by 5.5% when you compare the fall of 19 cohort to the fall of 18 cohort. Here is a screenshot from the same National Center for Education Statistics website I referenced a while ago. It is their condition of education report. This is just a one-year look at the fall of 2012, but it does break it out for us by sector and by gender. So if you take a look at the very first columns, that is all institutions nationwide. It's showing that for the fall of 2012, 62% of those students actually completed a bachelor's degree in 6 years. That is considered the 150% graduation rate. And then you can look at the next two sets of columns, the public and then the public nonprofit. And you can see the rates for both males and females as well. If you want more information, I have provided the link below that takes you directly to this condition of education report. Now here's a look at Arkansas graduation rates for our four-year institutions. These are bachelor-seeking students only. I provided the trend, three-year trend, 3 cohorts for a 100% rate. The 100% rate includes those students that actually graduate in what we call on time, so in 4 years. We are on a steady improvement for our 4-year graduation rate, and a similar trend for our 150% rate too. So for the students that actually graduate in 6 years. The most recent cohort, fall of 2014, we actually reported a 50.7% graduation rate for the most recent cohort. Here's the breakout by students by gender. I'm going to pause there. I think there was a question that popped up. Maria, did you have a question from somebody?
I did. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sonia. I had a question about the fall-to-fall retention rates for two-year colleges. Did that include transfers to the other institution, or is that just retention within their own institution?
No, and I'm actually glad whomever asked the question, because it's prompted me to actually state this and forgot to a while ago when I was talking about retention. We did actually change our methodology. We mentioned it in the actual report that's in the board book, but historically ADHE had always reported a retention rate for the two-year colleges as just the students started in this cohort year and they came back the next fall. However, we did change our methodology this year to include students that completed some type of credential within that year. That is similar to the national IPEDS definition, and a lot of our institutions follow that. So if a student completed within that year and did not return though that next fall, they did get included in that retention rate for the two-year colleges. So we did make a methodology adjustment this year for that. That had been kind of a bone of contention with our two-year colleges of we weren't given credit for those students that actually had received a credential, but we did this year. Okay, let's see. Back to 150% graduation rate for our four-year institutions by gender. As you can see, for both the male and female cohorts, we did see slight improvements with each cohort year for the last 3 cohorts. And here's the same cohorts, but we're taking a look at the race ethnicity categories. We did see improvements for the fall 2014 cohort, for our Asian student cohort, our Black student cohort, and our white student cohort. And for our two-year colleges, these are associate seeking students by gender. And they graduate within 150% of time. So that means they graduated within 3 years. For the most recent cohorts, as you can see for the fall 2017 cohort, for both male and female students, we did see improvements in the graduation rate. And here's a look at the two-year colleges by race ethnicity. As you can see, the one that stands out the most would be the 12% improvement by our Asian student cohort. That concludes the report on annual retention and graduation. Does anybody have any questions for me? All right, the second information item is the annual report of retention and graduation of student athletes. This report also includes some information on participation and also scholarship status. So this first slide shows you that we did have 239 student increase in the number of students participating in athletics at our institutions this year. Here's the participation by athletic scholarship. As you can see, there was a considerable increase in the number of student athletes receiving a partial athletic scholarship, and that by far is the largest category for scholarship participation. And we have fall to fall retention numbers for our student athletes. This first slide contains 5 of our 10 four-year institutions that have athletic programs. And here's the other 5 four-year institutions. We do have 2 two-year colleges that have had athletic programs long enough for us to do a 3-year trend, and that's ASU Mid-South and North Arkansas College. And a 6-year graduation rate for our student athletes. This is the first of 5 of 10 four-year institutions with athletic programs. That concludes my reports. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Hazelwood? Well, thank you, Ms. Hazelwood. Really appreciate those informational items. Always do a wonderful job presenting those. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next agenda item is an informational agenda item. I believe we're at number 5. Dr. Jesse Walker will present the annual report on first-year student remediation for fall of 2020.
Good morning again. So we're required to present the first year remediation report. In the past, it had centered around cut scores on exams such as the ACT. In this case, the sub-score of 19 in areas such as reading, math, and English. And in January 2016, we changed to a institutional level placement plan policy. Next slide, please. So what I'm presenting here is a statewide overview of remediation, but also in your packets are appendices with institutional level remediation outcomes based on their institutional level placement plans. So we had 20,767 first-time entering degree-seeking students, and of those, we noticed that we have 3 different types of remediation. We have anytime remediation, first year and second year remediation. Anytime is when the high school GPA or high school graduation date is ignored. So a student comes in and we can look at remediation at any point in their matriculation in their first year. First year means exactly that. We look at those students who in their first year where they remediated or in their second year where they remediated. And those numbers are indicated on the slide. Next slide. So anytime remediation, we saw, of course, an increase with the 2-year colleges, and this year it was only a minor increase from last year, and the 4-year colleges were at 34%. Overall, the state had a remediation rate of 42% of the 17,000 students coming in of last year. Next slide. Remediation by subject area, we saw a decrease, although math is still the #1 standalone course to be remediated in the state, with this past group 247. and then also English, followed by reading at the least. Complicating this report also is the fact that now many institutions are doing co-requisite courses. That's where you combine remediation with a gateway course. So you may not see that standalone course anymore for a student enrolling. You may see them enroll in a gateway course plus a remediation course. So the numbers are trending downward overall in terms of remediation for the state. Next slide. And broken out by gender, female students are the largest population in most institutions, and accordingly, they have the largest percentage of remediation. You notice in math, they're the largest percentage at 27%, followed by men at 11%. English was 4% for men and 8% for female, and reading was 2% and 1% respectively. And each one has, you can do multiple remediation groups, like for example, math and English, where those are 2 courses remediated in, and that was 8% for female and 3% for males. Next slide. And broken out by ethnic groups, the largest group in terms of remediation for the state was African Americans, followed by Hispanics and American Indians. The American Indian number seems high for the 4 institutions because of UA Fort Smith, who has a large population of those. Same thing with Hawaiians as well. So those numbers are kind of artificially high, but they do not represent a large population of the overall student body here in Arkansas. So it kind of, you know, and the lowest remediation rate was Asian Americans. Next slide. So as mentioned before, in your packet are the individual reports by institution level that tells you how, for example, UA Fort Smith compares to Arkansas State or Henderson and the UA system. Any questions on this item? Okay. This agenda item is an informational item about program viability, particularly new programs are relatively recently approved. The first part gives you the viability numbers by degree type. Next slide. Overall, when we did the analysis this year for AY 2017, that was 65 associate and certificate programs that were looked at, and the bachelor's, graduate, and professional degrees, there were 34 looked at for AY 15. Overall, there was a 52% programs that were on track in terms of viability, that's meeting viability numbers. Of those programs that were not on track, over 60% had been adjusted by institutions. This includes deletions, changing to inactive status, or basically saying the program will be put in inactive status within the next year. Overall, we had some stellar programs that stood out in terms of graduate production. This includes certificate of proficiency in pre-nursing at National Park College. This includes an associate in nursing at Arkansas State Jonesboro, a bachelor's of general studies at Arkansas State Jonesboro with 560 graduates in 5 years, which is quite impressive, and a graduate certificate at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock with 59 graduates in 5 years. Any questions about this agenda item? Okay.
Can you hear me?
I
Dr.
can.
Walker?
Yes, I can, Mr. Brodell.
52% of these programs on track. Do we have comparison data? I don't remember from last year or the years prior.
Last year,
how do we stack up this year compared to previous years?
Last year, the on track was 47%. So it's getting better.
Slight improvement.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And also, as the number of associates at the 2-year colleges, certificate programs are lessening, and this number is getting better simply because a lot of times 2-year colleges basically ramp up programs for demand. And as demand decreases, the program is deleted or basically put on inactive status. So it's kind of artificial in terms of that. So you may see a high number some years, other years you may see a low number. But for the last couple of years, it's been around 40-something%.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Walker. Any other questions for Dr. Walker? Thank you, Dr. Walker. We will move on to the report of the Finance Committee. I don't believe Mr. Revels is with us. Mr. Revels, are you still on?
He is not. He had to jump off, Al.
In his absence, I will recommend to the full board the approval of agenda items 8 through 10 based on the Finance Committee's report. Do I hear a second?
Yes, second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you for that. I appreciate you all on the Finance Committee, and we'll move on to the report of the Academic Committee. Ms. Griffin.
Mr. Brodell, the Academic Committee has reviewed items 22 and 23, and we recommend the approval of agenda items 11 through 21 to the full board.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Thank you for that, Ms. Griffin. We will now open the floor to any presidents and chancellors who wish to address the board, make any comments at this time. Hearing none, just want to thank everyone for being here today. Once again, want to welcome Grayson Bigger, Dr. Kyle Miller, and Dr. Jerry Cash, our new board members. Can't thank you enough for your willingness to serve, for being here and being part of this board. Look forward to working with you in the future. Look forward to a day where this meeting can be held in person and get to really meet you and shake your hands. Announcement, our next quarterly meeting will be July 30th, 2021. As of now, the plan is for it to continue being held via WebEx. If that changes, Dr. Markham and her wonderful staff will let us know. Hearing no other business to come before this board, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I thank you all. We will be adjourned. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. Have a great weekend.
Dr. Markham. Dr. Markham, can you hear me?
I think she's already off, Al.
I was just going to ask how she was doing. She said she got near a cat yesterday.
Yes.
Or near a person with a cat, something like that. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye.